Hello, I'm Liselle Sambury and welcome back to my channel where I talk about all things writing, traditional publishing, and a little bit of reading. And this is the August writing vlog, and all this month and really for the next couple months, probably for the next like 3 vlogs, I'm going to be working on drafting the second book in the my new YA Dark Academia fantasy trilogy. The first book, A Mastery of Monsters, is coming out June 3rd, 2025. And so right now I am starting to draft the actual second book, which is to like make sure that I'm giving myself enough time to kind of get everything done and get a polished draft off to my editor. My deadline is actually January 2nd of 2025. So I do have a good chunk of time, but I also want to like use that time very wisely. So I'm getting started with that. And I've already done my drafting for today. As usual, I woke up and I was like, I don't know how to write a book. I feel like every single time I haven't drafted for a while, I'm suddenly like nervous, like I'm not gonna know how to write anymore, which like at this point I've written so many books, it's so silly, but it happens every single time. And then of course I sit down and I'm fine and I just go ahead and I draft it. But yeah, it was good. I basically, even though I have the whole book plotted out, the kind of beats of what happens in a chapter, kind of like this happens and then this, I don't really have that planned. And so I just kind of like write that out for myself in the beginning. So like today's first chapter, I was like, okay, we're going to talk about this for a bit. Then we're going to have this fight happen. And then we're going to talk about this for a bit. And so I just like bullet pointed that out for myself and I just kind of sat down and did it. And yeah, it was a fun time for me to do it because it was just like good. There was a little bit of a fight scene. I got to look up some like cool little location things because I wanted it to be taking place in this like really grand ballroom. So I had to like look up some pictures of ballrooms and like figure out where in Kingston, Ontario this place is and all of that stuff. But yeah, so I just had a very good time with it. And at this point, I will plug that on TikTok, I am doing a drafting series where every single day that I draft, I'm making a video basically just kind of like summarizing the day. Of course, I'm still going to do these writing vlogs, but I don't update every single day on these, or every single work day rather. So if you really want to dive in deep and get into all of that, you can check me out on TikTok. It's at Liselle Sambury, and then you can watch that series there. This is my I don't want to say fully last ditch effort, but this is, you know, I'm attempting to do the TikTok thing and see how it goes and like experiment with that. So this is like all a part of that. Anyway, so with that plug over, yeah, so drafting is going good so far, which I'm happy about. It's also a very good work length for me. I know there was a very small period of time where I was like, maybe I could do 2 chapters a day. Absolutely not. It's enough. Like it takes up so much more energy than I ever think to actually do the drafting. And so even though it only takes me like a couple hours to get the day's work done, like I'm done. I don't want to do any more stuff. And I have all these like extra things that I still do on top of like writing like social media promotion things and you know, sometimes I have other stuff going on and like I have to do my accounting and blah 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 blah. And so it's just helpful to always have the extra time in case something else comes up. But yeah, I don't have a ton going on this month. I am doing like a reading type thing for Eastlink TV, so we're gonna do like an interview and then I'm gonna do a reading from Delicious Monsters and answer some questions and stuff. So that's happening on Friday. I still haven't chosen a passage to read. So I do need to choose a passage to read and actually like practice a reading a little bit. So, and like time myself to make sure that I'm doing the right time. So I do have to do that. But otherwise, things are trucking along. I do have a little bit of a submission update on my last vlog at the end. I was like, oh, something kind of positive has happened. No guarantees, but we'll see. And it was a good thing I said no guarantees because things did not work out. Which is, you know, that's the way it goes. That's the way it is. Submission and publishing are just kind of an up and down thing. But yeah, we continue on, we plow on with submission, and we'll see how that continues to go. But that's kind of the only update for that. And that's sub for my adult thriller that is on submission now. I'm trying to sell it to publishers. So we will see how that goes, but it keeps rolling on, keeps rolling on. And so do I. I've also restarted crocheting, which I've just decided I want to pick that hobby back up again. So I'm doing that, and I'm still knee deep in all the Olympics coverage, which is probably what I'm going to go watch now while I crochet. But yeah, I feel like this is a good solid start to the month in terms of like drafting and feeling like, okay, I feel like I've got a good handle on this book, and I think it's going to be a fun time. There's going to be so many fights. I'm excited for all of the like fights and stuff. I do find it really fun to write, even though sometimes I'm like, you got to work on the choreography of like where people are in space and that sort of thing. But I feel like I've watched so many like fantasy action things and like so much anime that I do actually have like a very good idea of like how fights can go and that sort of thing. So anyway, I'm yeah, just looking forward to all of that, and I will update you again later.
My hands are shaking, stifle my breath. You look so lovely, it scares me to death. I used to get so insecure with you, it's different. Yeah, just something about you makes me so sure. Don't know what it is, but
this is probably going to be a long update, so strap in. Yeah, so last week I took the week off of writing because I was in the hospital for most of the week. And yeah, so I'm just gonna update you on everything that happened. So in my last vlog, my July vlog, if you watched it, you may or may not remember, I talked about how I'd had this weird anxiety thing where I was walking and suddenly I was super, super out of breath and felt like I couldn't breathe, but I like talked myself through it and everything was fine. Wrong. In so many ways wrong. Turns out it was not anxiety, it was a bunch of blood clots in my lungs. Yeah, so basically on like last week, or I guess technically the week before, on Sunday we went out to dinner with some friends and I was having trouble breathing, and again I was like, I guess it's this weird anxiety thing, but once again I did not actually feel anxious, so I was like, okay, I don't really get it, but I was having trouble breathing walking into the restaurant, but I caught my breath again, and then we sat down for dinner, and I was eating this soup. And I suddenly just felt so hot, like super, super hot, and was just struggling for breath. And I was like, I'm sitting down. I was like, I don't understand. And I was like, it was a new group of people. So I was like, maybe there's a back of my mind anxiety thing. And I was like, okay, whatever. I was like, I just need to go to the bathroom because I'm wearing this sweatshirt. And I was like, I'm so hot. I was like, is this what a hot flash feels like? I was like, I just need to take off this sweater. So I go into the bathroom, I sit down, I take off the sweater, and I'm sitting down on the toilet. So imagine that. And I'm trying to catch my breath still. I have no idea what's going on, but I'm like, I don't know that I can go out there and like have a full dinner. I was like, I might have to leave. And then I look down at my thighs and I notice a ton of bruises, just a bunch of bruises, like a dozen bruises on each leg. And I was like, oh, yeah, I no longer think this is anxiety. I need to go to the hospital. So I texted my partner from the toilet, but we're out to dinner for the people. So he wasn't really looking at his phone. And I was like, okay, I gotta get from the toilet back to the table. So I get up, I'm struggling to breathe again. I didn't put the sweatshirt back on, so I'm in my bra. I'm in my bra. Though I will say it's like a sports bra, so it looks like a top. I've worn it as a top before, so it wasn't too bad. And I have the sweatshirt tied around my waist. I struggle to get to the table. And of course, when I'm getting to the table, people are walking by and like being annoying in that way that people walk by you where you're trying to get past someone and it's like it's taking them so long to get past you. And I'm like, I'm barely holding myself up. So I'm now super annoyed. But I get to the table and all bets are off. I'm not trying for any decorum. I'm openly panting. I'm like, I need to go to the hospital. My partner was like, okay, let's go to the car. And I was like, I cannot walk to the car. I was like, you have to pull up the car to the front. So pulls up the car to the front. I struggle to walk from the table at the restaurant to the car. I can't even say goodbye to the people we're at dinner with. I need to leave. So I stumble my way to the car. I'm in the car. I'm panting. And again, it doesn't feel like anything is in my throat or anything like that. It's just like I'm just struggling to catch. It felt like I was struggling to catch my breath. Like when you like do a sprint or you run somewhere and you're catching it just felt like I was just doing that repetitively. So we get to the hospital now. He's like, can you get out of the car? And I was like, can somebody come get me? He went into the hospital. They were like, for someone to come get you, we have to call an ambulance. And I was like, okay, I'm not even gonna deal with that. So, all right, okay, I will make it. And from the car, because we parked in front of the hospital, from the car to the hospital is like, I don't know how many paces, like not even half a block. I cannot get all the way in. I get like halfway and I have to squat on the ground and try and catch my breath again. And like do it enough that I can then make it to the chair in the hospital. So like, I'm just like, I'm fully struggling. My poor partner is panicking, but I will say to the hospital's credit, they got me in right away. Like, they called me into triage right away. I struggled again to get to the chair in triage. They did all their stuff and they're like, okay, we're going to bring you into the back. You have to go to this other place. And I was like, I can't. I was like, please get me a wheelchair. I was like, I cannot be made to walk anywhere else. Like I just can't do it. So they give me the wheelchair, thankfully. They wheel me onto the different places. Anyway, we are in the emergency room for ages. We got there at like 6 o'clock. And eventually, again, they put me in a hospital room. I don't get into that room until like 3 a.m. So we're here for ages. They're doing a bunch of tests. They're trying to take my blood. It is already difficult for people to take my blood because I have very deep and very small veins. No word of a lie, I am poked a dozen times before finally the doctor comes in and uses a fancy machine and they get an IV in me and they take blood that way. Anyway, and then they're like, we're going to do a CT scan because we think there's blood clots in your lungs. And I was like, okay. And they do this. And at that point, like 2 hours into being in the emergency room, I felt normal again. Like everything was fine again. Like it was like when I got up to go places, I would become short of breath again, but not to the level that I was. And to me, I felt normal. I felt like everything was good. So anyway, so we do this CT scan. Again, I have to be wheelchaired everywhere because I can't actually walk long paces. Like the bathroom was right across the hall. I could get to the bathroom and that was kind of like it. Anyway, so we do the CT scan and the doctor comes in and he's like, you have a significant amount of blood clots in your lungs. And I was like, okay. So basically they believe as a result of my birth control, which has a risk of blood clots, which again, I never thought that risk would be something that actually presented itself. But it did, because I had a ton of blood clots in my lungs and I had a pulmonary embolism as a result. So I had a blood clot that kind of started in one of my legs and went up. That's why I had the bruising on my legs and into my lungs. And then there was that blockage, which is what the pulmonary embolism is, which is why I have so much trouble breathing because I was not getting enough air. And so clearly something like that on a smaller scale had happened when I was in Toronto, and I didn't realize. and I thought it was anxiety and went about my merry way. So yeah, very serious. But I like the whole time I just felt normal. But yeah, treatable, very treatable. So they put me on blood thinners. They wanted to keep me in the hospital for observation, obviously because it's a significant thing. And so they kept me, I didn't get out of the hospital until Thursday afternoon, from being there Sunday night. And so they've had me on a regimen of blood thinners, and the amount of clots in my body has been going down. And so I'm going to be on those for a while. But yeah, so that was the whole thing. What I've learned about this is, one, side effects for medications are real. And just because I don't know anyone that had, you know, complications or actually gotten blood clots from their birth control, doesn't mean it doesn't actually happen. And yeah, if you have shortness of breath, yeah, don't just blame things on anxiety. And I shouldn't have just blamed things on anxiety. I think it was like compounded with the fact that I just started a new anxiety medication, and so I thought the anxiety medication didn't have anything to do with it, just as an FYI. But I think I just thought that maybe I was still feeling anxiety, but I'd never felt anxiety physically in that way. So I guess I should have just known it was different. But yeah, good to go to the doctor. I mean, I live in Canada. We have universal healthcare, and so there's really no excuse for me to not go to the doctor, except that it's like kind of annoying to call them and make appointments because their line is always busy. But yeah, so everything is good now. I was very fortunate. And things worked out and everything was fine. They were very lovely in the hospital, which was great. It's times like that where I'm like really thankful about like the small town charm of like being in a smaller community. I feel like if I was at a big Toronto hospital, things would have maybe not gone the same way. And yeah, so it's just good that everything was found out and everything was organized, and yeah, so I'm doing fine, everything is okay, and I am back to my normal routine now of drafting. So yeah, so watching this vlog, I've been posting, I started doing a drafting series on TikTok, where I update like every day of what's going on with drafting. And so I've been doing that. So you may have seen some of those videos, but of course the writing vlogs are more like comprehensive writing life stuff than like just the drafting stuff. So I'm glad to kind of, you know, have both of those things going, and being able to share those on YouTube. So you may have seen some of those. And so, but I will say overall how drafting has been going, has been like pretty good. It's a first draft, so I know there are like things that I'm not doing like great. Like there are lots of situations in which there's kind of like too many characters in a scene, and I know that not every character is getting their due because I'm trying to make sure the chapter is like a reasonable length. So that's been something that's been coming up a little bit. I do think I'm gonna have to add more chapters to that first act to make sure that all the characters are getting their moment, and I am always kind of nervous about adding more to the first act because I feel like I have this complex that I think started with Blood Like Magic, where I like, you know, it's the whole thing of like getting tagged in some things where people were like, the beginning is slow. And so I feel like getting really in my head about like being concerned about the beginnings of my books being too slow. But there's also a bit of trade-off, right? Like you make the beginning a little bit faster and you sacrifice a little bit of the character stuff. And so there's always that kind of back and forth. So yeah, I feel like I find that challenging. I feel like I always now want to try and make that beginning bit faster paced, but like I do need to make time for character, and especially in like a sequel in which there's like so many characters now, like there's so many, and I keep adding more, and I was like, they just need time to breathe. And if that means I have to add more chapters to the first act, that is totally fine. And honestly, there are so many fights in this book that I'm just like, I feel like those are entertainment enough. So yeah, I do think I'm gonna have to add like at least one chapter to that first act just to make sure every character is getting some time. So that's kind of my main challenge in drafting now, is just making sure that each character has some room to breathe while I'm doing all of these plot things. But otherwise, it's been going really well. I think I'm at 14,000 words. I'm checking my computer. Yeah, I'm at 14,000 words. I'm on chapter 6. I'm not supposed to have that many words. I'm about 2,000 words over, but that's classic Liselle, so I'm not too concerned about it. But yeah, otherwise, submission is submissioning. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's been a little bit rough. I think, you know, the positive is I think we're getting really good responses in a good amount of time. But I also, I don't know, I feel like I've started to feel insecure about the project, where I didn't before. And I know it's still very early days, like we're like a month and a week into it. But I did find that yesterday I had like a whole moment where I felt really, really insecure about the book. And I was like, is this, like, I don't know. I was just kind of like, is this like not special enough, or like not good enough, or like not something enough? And I just kind of was like, I don't know. And I don't know how to make it that. But again, it's still early days. And so I like try to calm down within myself. But I think that's the thing about, you know, something like submission and like dealing with rejection. I feel like it's very easy to feel insecure when that's happening, because it's kind of like, you know, I mean, a rejection is a rejection. And so, you know, I think it's hard for it to not kind of get to you in some way. And I think that's kind of the way I feel. And even though all the responses we've gotten have been very, very, very kind, and like wonderful, and like we've gotten a lot of great praise. Yeah, I think I just like, I don't know. I think the thing about publication is that it's not enough to have a good book. There has to be these like extra things of like timing and right place and right time. And like, I think all of that is what's difficult. And like knowing if you've somehow landed on that, and there's no real way to know that without kind of, yeah, without having an offer, I guess. So yeah, I was feeling a little bit insecure about the project, but it kind of, you know, it is what it is, and it's not over until it's over, and so yeah, we'll see how it goes. But it was I was feeling a little rough yesterday, but I am feeling better today. I don't know that I would say I'm like more hopeful, or that I've suddenly re-gotten belief in the project, because I feel like I still kind of feel the same way I did yesterday in that respect. But I feel like I'm just kind of like, well, we'll just see. And it's not over until it's over, and that's kind of where I'm sitting at. So yeah, this was a long update, as I said it was going to be, mostly because I had to get into all of those medical things, but I really am feeling good. I'm off that birth control, so that should not be happening and should continue kind of trending down. And I have a follow-up with my doctor tomorrow, so I'm going to get to do that follow-up and all of that. But yeah, feeling at the very least feeling good to have my health, to still be here. Yeah, so that's kind of it. And otherwise, I'm gonna keep trucking along, and I'll update you later.
Make me wanna stay, take a leap of faith. I know that you're safe, I know that you save me. You'll be my parachute, baby, know you'll catch me whenever I fall. It's like my laces untied, got me tripping right into your arms. Headed straight down through the night clouds, so is my heart pounds 10,000 feet between my parachute, baby, know you'll catch me whenever I fall. I know you got me, butterfly feeling, edge of a cliff, rush of adrenaline in your kiss. Tethered up together, we could go the distance. Yeah, this atmospheric pressure, something real.
Hello, it is a Monday. I was supposed to update on like a Friday or something, and I feel like I just like totally forgot and I just didn't do it. But anyway, I am here now. How is drafting going? It's going well. I just started like getting into the competition part of the book, so I'm like having a really fun time writing now. I still like don't want to, like I feel like it's just like because I'm aware that it's work. I'm like, I don't want to write, and then of course I sit down and I'm fine. But it's been really exciting to get into like the actual like nitty-gritty of the competition. They haven't actually started like their fighting, but we've had like the opening parade, which has been really great, and then they just watched their like first match today, which was also really exciting and I'm happy they got to do that. So yeah, it's just kind of like I'm setting the tone for it and like how that whole thing is going together, which is good because I've like spent a lot of time thinking about these competition mechanics and that sort of thing. And I have really like been following, like listening to how people kind of critique competition books that they've read in the past and like what kind of like hasn't worked or hasn't made sense, so that I can kind of like, I guess, like take feedback from other books and kind of apply it to my own book and like how I'm putting things together. And for me, like a big thing that I think I've heard people talk about is like when you're having a sort of like to the death competition or like a competition where people are going to die, like thinking about why that's a thing. And I do think that's like important and it makes sense because when you think about something like the Hunger Games, like the point of that, like, and I know I talk about the Hunger Games so often when I talk about this book, but I just like, I can't. It's just like, for me, it's like the golden one, but like it makes sense because it's, you know, it's an oppressive society and the point is to punish the districts. And so this fight to the death makes sense because it is punishing, it is terrible and awful, and like that all makes sense together. But like you can't just throw that around willy-nilly because it just like it has to make sense. Like in the case of my book, why they're doing these competitions, it's like a mechanic to help level up the monsters, because for reasons they are trying to in some ways build up an army and they need that army to be full of like very strong soldiers, and like the big part of that is the monsters and like their power and like how much kind of, you know, how much they are able to do, and these competitions help them level up, help them become more skilled. And same with the people who are like competing and who are not monsters, like it's the same thing for them. Like it helps them increase their skills, increase their combat, and so there's an overarching purpose to that. And so in that case, like it is deadly, but they're not killing people on purpose. Like it's more like a side effect. Like sometimes people die and that's why it's deadly, but like the point is not to kill people. The point is to compete and to help build each other up and like get better at like kind of fighting, and also to like make sure they are choosing the most elite among the society to make sure that they are continuously building up those people. And so yeah, that's something I think about with these things. And of course you like market it as a deadly competition because that's what people are interested in, but like it's not like, that's not the purpose. So I don't know, I just like, I think about that a lot as I like design all these competitions, like that it has to make sense within the framework of the society, and not necessarily like some of the things the society might believe in might be like, that's like kind of off the wall, but it makes sense for them. Like this whole system makes sense given their beliefs and their goals, and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm just having a good time getting to actually get into the competition. I am thinking that I don't have enough training lead up. I was trying to do some of the training lead up, but I feel like I skipped too much time, but I also like didn't want to make the first act too long because the competition doesn't start until the second act. But it's like, it's always a little bit difficult. It's always a little bit of a balancing act because I want to give enough training time for it to make sense, because like to have a month and to not spend that time training would be wild. But yeah, it's a balance, and I think I'm trying to strike that balance. And yeah, I feel like it's mostly working. But I already know that this book is like becoming so long. But anyway, I also got the past pages for A Mastery of Monsters for the first book in this series as I write the second. So I'm also now doing double duty each day, which is kind of like, but you know, it is what it is. And so I am able to read like 50 pages at a time, which is actually like it's my ideal pace when I'm doing past pages, to be able to read through 50 pages at a time. It's just like, it's enough that I can like really concentrate. And of course, like when I read books for fun, I'm trying to like read like 100 pages at a time because I find that to be a good pace for reading. But when I'm doing past pages, like I'm not editing it, but I am reading through it with like a fine-tooth comb, because this is kind of like my last chance to do that. And so 50 pages a day is like a very, very good pace for me. So that's what I'm doing now. I've already done kind of 2 days of that, and I'm now, I guess this is like my 3rd day into it. And that's going well too. I'm enjoying the story as I read through it, and I'm like, oh, this is like good. Like I think this is really good. Like I'm really excited for people to read this. And so that's really positive. And I'm also making slight changes, again, because of things that have popped up in the sequel. I've realized I need to do little changes to the book, which is always the thing that's hard for me when I do past pages. Is I know that the advanced reader copies have already been created from copy edits. So I know that the version that I am reading and editing right now, that is what is going to be handed out to people as advanced reader copies. And so whenever I see like errors, like it's so extra painful, because I know people are going to be reading that, and I know it says uncorrected proof, it says so. So it's like people know that there will be errors in there, but it's still always like I was reading through yesterday and it was like, it said knives, like, you know, the plural of knife, like something you cut with. For whatever reason, instead of knives, I had written knives, and we didn't catch it. And I'm just like, oh, now people are gonna like read the arc and be like, blah, 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 knives. And I'm just like, and I know, again, it's uncorrected. So like we haven't done this final pass, but like sometimes I just like cringe so hard, and I'm like, but anyway, other than that, the book, the story, very good. It is really long. It's so long. But to me, it's long, but it's all like good stuff. And I just, you know, I really have to do away with my complex about my books being really long. It's just, it's a fantasy. It's a fantasy. It's long. But man, when I like got the past pages and it was like 600 pages, I was like, oh damn, like. But again, I'm reading through it myself, and even though I've read this book so many times, I'm like, this is good, and I'm having a fun time, and I'm really excited for people to read it, so I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, it's a good time. It really is, and it is so like, to me, like just such a fun project. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, I don't know, I'm really attached to letting it be whatever it is. I think I've gotten to this point in my career in which I'm just like, I feel like I'm exhausted from the prospect of like wishing and hoping for a book to break out. I feel like I'm just like, I'm tired and I can't be bothered anymore. I'm still gonna do things. I still gonna do things to market and promote the book. Of course, I always do. But I feel like I'm like so separated from like wishing and hoping for a book to like, you know, be a New York Times bestseller or this thing or that thing. And so instead I'm really just focusing on like, I just think this is a super fun book, and I think it's gonna be fun for people to read, even though it's giant as hell. And I'm gonna promote the heck out of it because I want people to read it, because I think it's so fun. I've also been commissioning some artwork. I already have 2 portraits I commissioned. So I already have that. And so the same artist, I'm commissioning them again to do one of like the 2 characters together. That's like more of like a full body thing. And so I'm excited to have that, especially because I wasn't sure in the portrait that you could really like tell that August is like a bigger girl. And so I wanted something full body so that that representation can be more clear as well. And so that's why I also wanted like more of a full body commission. And so I got that and I'm very excited. We're working on it now. I'm like seeing sketches and stuff. It's so cool. I like love commissioning stuff. It's you know, it's pricey, but it's very worth it. Very worth it. And I'm excited because then these are things that I can like give out as prints and like that sort of thing in the future. So that's something I'm also working on for our Mastery Monsters, and I'm looking forward to like when I get to reveal those and things like that. But it's so good. It's looking so good already just as a sketch. I just feel like it's gonna be even better. So overall, I'm doing good. I think I've dispensed with the submission sads because I'm just like honestly just putting it completely out of my mind. And I've really settled in, you know, it's one of those things, like there's so many things in publishing you just have control, you don't have control over, and I really want to like let go of those things because I can't control them. And so, you know, deal with things as they come up, and just kind of focus on the things that I have going, that I'm, you know, actively in, which is drafting this book and doing my past pages, and everything else is kind of everything else. So yeah, that's it for me, and I will check in with you at some point. Oh, I guess the next time I check in with you, it'll be the end of the vlog. So yeah, I guess I'll check in then.
You make me wanna stay, take a leap of faith. I know that you're safe, I know you'll be my parachute, baby. Know you'll catch me whenever I fall. I fall. It's like my laces untied, got me tripping right into your arms. Your arms. Headed straight down through the night clouds, so is my heart pounds 10,000 feet, but you're my parachute, baby. Know you'll catch me whenever I fall. I know you got me. Be my parachute, be my parachute, be my parachute. I know you got me.
It is the end of the vlog, the end of this month, and I am currently about, I think, 35% of the way done, but I'm not even sure that's accurate because I really am starting to doubt that this book is going to be 100,000 words, or this draft is going to be 100,000 words when I finish. It is probably going to be closer to maybe 115,000 words. I just I feel like when I planned, I really did not account for / give myself enough time to do the chapters that have like actual battle matches in them. I feel like I made each chapter, I was like, each chapter is gonna be a match, but then they have to do all this other stuff. So there's supposed to be investigations. And then I also feel like what I realized is I need a little bit of lead up time to the match happening, and then I need a little bit of debrief time. And I think for whatever reason when I was planning, I thought I could just like jump from match to match, and it just like doesn't make sense character wise, just because of like things that go on in each chapter. Like she can't just start a match and like have a result and then move on to the next match. It's just like it can't happen. Like I need time for them to spectate, so to watch other people's matches and like have conversations about strategies and like character development. I need time for them to do the investigation because they're investigating the murder of a character, and so I need time for them to do the investigation stuff, and I need character debrief time because you know, she's working in a team, like her and the love interest have a certain partnership, and now there's this new character, Nolan, who has come in and due to circumstances has kind of become part of that, and there's growing pains there with like having to add someone to your existing dynamic. There's also the whole like romance relationship things. It's kind of now become forbidden romance and like working that out, and it's just like I need time for all of that because the match itself is like just the action part, and I think that's where I really kind of like didn't do so great in my planning is I really didn't make space for that. And so now on the fly, I'm making space for that, which is good because I think that's really helping the character dynamic. Like they need time to be like, what went down in that match? Why did this work? Or why did this not work? Or what happened? Or blah, 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 blah. They need that time. And so that's what I'm now doing on the fly. But because I'm doing that on the fly, I keep splitting what was meant to be like, you know, 2 scenes in 1 chapter into now 2 chapters. And so I keep bulking up that section. And so I just know now that any section that has the matches that are actually happening during this competition, it's going to bulk up that section. And so I've just like, I've done away with pacing. I'm not concerning myself with the pacing now because I keep adding chapters, and there's just like, there's no way for me to manage the pacing in this drafting mode. So like that is something I will have to do in my self edit. I'll have to fix and tweak and do all that stuff. But overall, even though each day I wake up and I'm like, the last thing I want to do is sit down and write, like I just don't feel like it. I'm just feeling, and it's not that I'm like, you know, upset with the story or anything, because when I sit down and I'm writing the story, I'm super engaged in it and I'm actually having like a good time doing it. It's just like getting myself to work is the harder bit, and it's truly, I just like don't want to do anything. I'm just in that mode. And I think it's because I'm aware that I'm going to be drafting this for so long. And I feel like it's catching up to me, and I feel like it wasn't so bad when I was just doing the drafting only, because then I had the entire other half of the day to like decompress and blah, 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 blah. But because I now have had to do past pages for a mastery of monsters, it's kind of like it's interrupted things, because now I'm doing like full days, and like having to do full days when you were already not even motivated to do a half day is difficult. So that's been adding on to it. But even when I'm doing the past pages, like I've been really happy with reading through the story. Like I just feel like it's such a good story, and I know that it's long. All my books are long, to be honest. All my books are long, and it's long, but I just feel like it doesn't feel long. Like even, you know, in this point of past pages, usually by the time I get to past pages in a book, I can't stand this book. Like the last thing I want to do is read this book. I don't want to read it. I don't feel like going over it again. I'm not having a fun time. I'm really like slogging through it. Like this is not, you know, it's not enjoyable anymore at that point, but I'm getting it done, and I still love the book and everything is okay. But with this book, with A Mastery of Monsters, I am reading through and I'm like, this is great. I'm like, I'm enjoying this. And yeah, I don't have motivation to work, but I'm so engaged in it when I'm in it. And I'm so like enjoying the chapters and enjoying the story. And even though it's a long book, I feel like it doesn't feel long, because even though there's there's that length, I feel like everything that's happening is so engaging. And I feel like I felt a little bit insecure about the story, because it is about like a deadly competition, but like the deadly aspects of the competition don't really come into play until kind of the halfway point. Because, you know, in building up this competition, I talked about this before, like it has to make sense. And so to me, if your operative is that you want to make sure that people are succeeding at this and that you can successfully build up your army, you need to train people effectively. And so the sort of preliminary aspects of the competition is a lot of like training and helping and nurturing and building up before they're like, okay, now get down to punching each other in the face. And to me that makes sense, because that's kind of the operative of what they're working in. And of course that adds length, but I really do just feel like it reads fast. I feel like it's a fun time, and it is wild to me at this stage when I usually like cannot stand reading a book anymore, because I've read it so many times, that I'm really like, this is so fun and this is so good and this is like so just like exactly what I wanted. And to me, I feel like that's a really good sign. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at with the project. I am feeling the not anxiety, just like this sort of like, I don't know if trepidation is the word, or maybe dread is a better word, of being like, oh my gosh, I still have so much of this book to write. Even if I was halfway, I would still be like, oh my gosh, I still have so much of this book to write. But you know, it is what it is. That's part of the process. And thankfully, at least after next week, I'll be done past pages. And so I won't have that addition of kind of doing a stacked workload, which is nice. I can just go back to solely concentrating on the sequel, which is great and fantastic. So I'm excited about that. But with the increased length too, I'm probably going to be working into December. I do always like to try and take December off the whole month, but I don't think that's gonna happen. I think it's just like I'm gonna need more time to draft out this project than, you know, than anticipated. But that's why I had that buffer of December, so that I could use that time if I needed to. And I probably will have to dip into that time to have an appropriate self-edit after I draft this whole thing. But I've just made my peace with it. It is what it is. I want to get a good version of this book done. But otherwise, peripherally, I am in the state in which I am pretending that submission is not happening and that I am not on it. That's kind of the vibe I'm in, and that's working really well for me to just kind of pretend it's not a thing that's occurring. And otherwise, I just finished commissioning some artwork for A Mastery of Monsters. This is the same artist I commissioned to do portraits of both August and Virgil, who's the main character and the love interest. So I'm really excited. Now I have all this art. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I will figure it out at some point. I'm also kind of looking into marketing aspects, but I think we're also going to soon be having kind of a conversation with my publisher to kind of see where their head is at generally about marketing, which will be helpful because then I can sort of decide what I'm going to do on my end and like how much I feel that I need to do on my end, just because I'm aware that like the first book in the series is your best chance to get people on board with the series. And so it's one of those situations in which I feel like investment in marketing is really important. And so depending on what my publisher is doing, then I really have to decide what I'm doing, because I want to make sure that I give this first book as much of a chance as possible to reach as many people as possible who would be interested in it. So that's kind of the headspace I'm in. I'm kind of thinking about that sort of thing at this point in time. I just realized now that probably the stuff I put on my lips has been all over my lips this whole time, but I feel like that's the case for half my videos. So there you go. But yeah, so I'm like thinking about marketing for A Mastery of Monsters. I think just because we're coming towards the end of the editorial process. So me and my editor just did the jacket copy. How we do the jacket copy is she writes it, which I love and is amazing. She writes it. She will often like pull pieces from the initial pitch, because I do a pitch letter when we pitch books for selling to them anyway, and so she'll like usually like take bits and pieces from that, and she'll like add her own thing to it, and then she sends it to me basically to add my own edits. Her jacket copy was pretty much perfect. I just added little tweaks here and there, and so we finalized that. So we have the back jacket copy. We've had the cover for ages. I'm about to be done these past pages, and so I suspect that we are coming up very soon to the cover reveal. And to me, like, the announcement is like a thing, sure, for promoting the book, but to me, once you do the cover reveal and you have pre-order links, that's when the marketing for the book begins. Because that cover is what's going to be passed around, shared with people, built up buzz for the book. And then of course at that point I have pre-order links, and so I could start building up sales for the book. And so to me, that's like the point at which I start like really turning on the marketing gears, and I like try and make a video or something that I can do to really promote that cover reveal. So yeah, I think we're coming up on that point. I wouldn't be surprised if next month, sometime in September, maybe October, that we'll actually get to do that reveal and start doing that stuff. So I'm kind of trying to prep myself for doing all of that and being engaged in that. Again, I don't know that I'm going to do a pre-order thing like I did for Tender Beasts. That really relied on the fact that like I was doing it and I was kind of pulling in people who had already liked Delicious Monsters, and in a new series, I just feel like it's really It's really hard. So I don't know. I feel like pre-order efforts are something that are better saved for like a second book in the series when people are kind of already familiar with the books and characters, that sort of thing. So I don't know if I'm going to end up holding on to this art all the way until then or what. But yeah, we'll see. So that's kind of the point that I'm at. My focus is the sequel drafting, finishing up those past pages, which I'm going to do in that first week of September, and then kind of turning my mind to marketing for A Mastery of Monsters and kind of figuring out what's going to happen in there. But again, we'll be very reliant on kind of what my publisher comes back with and what they're thinking about. So yeah, that's kind of the state I'm in, but I'm very excited for this long weekend. I'm looking forward to watching home shows and playing Animal Crossing, and that's probably all I'm gonna be doing. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this vlog. Hopefully it wasn't too chaotic considering that I was in the hospital for a bit at the end there. It is wild to think that happened this month. It feels like so long ago, but that did happen this month. But anyway, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And thank you so much for watching. Bye!
Fast, I'm not afraid to land, 'cause you're my only solid ground. Flecks of gold in your eyes.